2023, is Airbnb dead? Like, you know, a lot of people, if you get on like some of the super host Airbnb Facebook, a lot of people are saying like it's dead, it's oversaturated.
It's not a game, it's a rich thing.
Hey y'all, it's your girl Ashley and welcome back to another one of my YouTube videos. So in today's video, I am giving you the down and dirty, the nitty gritty on everything you need to know if you are a new host or you are considering on the Airbnb platform in 2023. So backstory, if you do not follow me or you are not familiar with our story, James and I purchased a distressed property in June of 2022. We then rehabbed that property and are currently utilizing it as a short-term rental on the Airbnb platform. The 5th of 2022 is when we first launched our property and we went live on Airbnb. So we haven't even been on Airbnb for about 2 months now, a little bit over 2 months, like 2 months and some days. And even within this short time frame, there is so much that I have learned, so much that I want to share with you guys or anyone who is thinking about hosting, who just got started hosting and you're not having like the success that you thought that you were going to have. 2023, is Airbnb dead? Like, you know, a lot of people, if you get on like some of the super host Airbnb Facebook, a lot of people are saying like it's dead, it's oversaturated. There's no money in Airbnb, it's too many people, they're not getting bookings, their calendar is wide open. So I just kind of want to share my experience and if I'm experiencing the same thing. Was this essentially, I have 5 tips for new hosts. So to answer the question, no, it was not a mistake. Joining Airbnb was probably one of the best decisions that we made, essentially because we have been doing so well on Airbnb that we have not had to utilize another platform. I have looked into Furnish Finder, I have looked into VRBO, but my calendar stayed booked on Airbnb, so really there's no reason for me to change or to utilize another platform so far. So first, let's get into tip number 1. So tip number 1 is going to be identifying your target market and your location. So I believe this is one of the main reasons we have been successful on the Airbnb platform. So we specifically targeted a military area. So we currently live in San Antonio. In San Antonio, there is Lackland Air Force Base. Lackland Air Force Base is the base that all airmen come through for boot camp. Additionally, here in San Antonio, there is like Air Force Tech School. So after they go to boot camp, they have these schools that they have to go to in order to learn their jobs, as well as A schools for the Navy. So we have weekly graduations at the Navy A school for our corpsmen, and the Air Force also has weekly boot camp graduations. Boot camp is such a huge milestone. If no one in your family supports you ever in your military career, the 2 things that they're probably going to support is when you graduate from boot camp and when you retire from the military. So we knew this. We understood that our market, the population that we was trying to target in the area was going to be super important in order to be successful on the Airbnb platform, and it has. So tip number 1 for you guys is make sure you are doing your research on where you want to target, what guest population you're trying to target. Does it make sense? The location of it, how far is your Airbnb from different locations to the Air Force boot camp site? We're also 6.2 miles from SeaWorld. Like any major attractions in San Antonio, we have the famous Alamo here, the Riverwalk. These are all touristy type spots. And you would think like, oh, well, if it's touristy, then it's probably oversaturated or it's overpopulated. But that is not necessarily true. Because of the way that short-term rentals currently are running in San Antonio and in most cities, there's a cap or a limit on how many short-term rentals, which I'll talk about that more in my second tip, to how many Airbnbs or short-term rentals can be, not Airbnb, because Airbnb is just a platform, but short-term rentals can be in a set location. That's another research point that you need to do when you're talking about your target market, you're talking about your location. You know, you want to do that research to know, okay, well, how many other Airbnbs or short-term rentals are in this area? And will this be a good area for me? Before we chose that area, I did my research and I reached out to the county or the city rep to ask her, hey, how many short-term rentals are already in this area? Will I be able to utilize a short-term rental in this area? That was one of the first things I did before even choosing that property or deciding what area or what properties I wanted to target. So that's just tip number one. Make sure that you are really thinking about your location, the market, the guests that you are trying to attract, and if it's realistic. Does it make sense? All right, tip number two is going to be knowing your local laws. So for San Antonio, we have to have a short-term rental permit in order to operate. Most cities, you need to have a short-term rental permit. Some cities you don't. So like if there are certain areas of San Antonio outside of the city limits of San Antonio, you do not need a short-term rental to operate. So make sure that you are doing your research and you are understanding what your particular area or what your city is requiring of you as the owner or the short-term rental operator. In addition to having a short-term rental permit, you want to look and see what that entails. Is there a short-term rental fee? For me, there was a $100 fee. I had to also upload a floor plan. So if you don't have a floor plan of your current home, then you need to look into one of the apps that will allow you. Link up here the app that I utilized in order to recreate a floor plan, because the city wanted to see, you know, where the exits were, where the fire extinguisher is located. So again, these are things that you want to know before you just jump into this business. In addition to your rental permit, your floor plan, and all of the criteria that is needed in order to submit or apply for a short-term rental, you want to know your local laws as far as if you have to pay taxes and what that looks like. So for me, an example, I have to pay state taxes, but I also pay local taxes. So my state taxes are like embedded in my Airbnb fee. So I can have my guests essentially pay those state taxes, and you can set that up through the Airbnb platform where those taxes are automatically taken out, paid by your guests, and Airbnb submits them to the state on your behalf. For local taxes though, this goes back to that short-term rental permit. The same department that handles the short-term rental permit, they handle what they call a hot tax. So it's a hotel occupancy tax. So if you are operating a home as a short-term rental, you are essentially operating like a hotel owner. So you have to pay hotel occupancy tax. So for San Antonio, at the end of every month, I have to input my total earnings, and I have to pay Bexar County taxes and the City of San Antonio taxes. And those are two different sets of taxes. I input that number of my earnings, and then they tell me how much I have to pay the City of San Antonio or the City of San Antonio and Bexar County taxes. So that's another tip that people probably aren't tracking or don't think about. Yeah, you have your state taxes that you have to pay, but you also have to pay local taxes in order to operate your business. All right, so tip number 3, setting up your Airbnb. So you have now picked your primary location, you did your research, you know what your target market is, you know what guests you're trying to attract. You have went and applied for your short-term rental permit. You've looked at all your local laws to see what the requirement is to operate as a short-term rental business. So now you are ready to actually set up your profile on Airbnb and list your property. So people don't realize that it really takes a lot of time to set the initial setup of your property on the Airbnb platform. So it took me probably about 4 to 6 hours to actually get it the way that I wanted to get it. And before that, it took me days and weeks of looking at other people's properties, of looking at other people's listing and how they're wording, reading reviews to see what guests were looking for, amenities that they really enjoyed, amenities that they wish they had, amenities that the host may have had that they were like, oh, you could have did without this, or oh, we really enjoyed this. So there's a lot of research that goes in and a lot of legwork before you just up and put a property on Airbnb or any short-term rental platform if you want to be successful. In addition to that, there's going to be a section where you set up your calendar, how far you want your calendar to go out. So do you want to have your calendar open for a full 6 months? Do you only want to have it open for 3 months? Do you want to have a day blocked off before and after each stay? Or do you want to just have back-to-back bookings, meaning someone is checking out on a Friday and somebody is checking in on a Friday? The reason why this is important, and I'm putting this out there so you can go ahead and think about this now, is because you have to think about repairs. You have to think about, when am I going to have time to get in and fix this or update this or add this? We didn't really think about like the maintenance part of it when I first set it up, and then later on I was like, oh wait, we need to maybe block out a couple of days or not have our calendar out so far, because if something happens and somebody books that far out, you know, what if we're down or we can't have it back up and then we have to cancel that reservation? So just make sure that you're taking into consideration your calendar, your time frame, when you're going to have scheduled maintenance, if you are going to be able to have a cleaner that's available to clean a property on a certain schedule, so that you can have those same day checkout, check-in type bookings. Or if you're going to be cleaning it yourself, do you need to block out a day before or a day after? So after you set up your online profile on Airbnb, Airbnb gives you a 24-hour period before they actually publish your listing. So you can set it all up, you can preview it, and you can see it from the guest point of view. That's what I really like. So after I went in and I put in, I just, talked about myself, described the property, put in the pictures, all of that good stuff, and had it the way that I wanted it. I had 24 hours to keep going back in and looking at it to say, okay, this is how they're gonna view it. I like the way it looks. Oh, I missed the word here, before it actually goes live. And even once it goes live, you can constantly go in and edit, take things away. And that's really all that I have as far as like your setup. I'll probably do more of a detailed video later to kind of go into detail more of the setup of actually putting it all together on the Airbnb platform. Tip number 4. So have a plan and having expectations that hiccups will happen. So for us, we haven't had any major issues come into play, but we have had some. So we had a guest that was supposed to check in at I think 1500 or 3 o'clock. And it was our first guest after San Antonio had gotten cold. So we were used to, like, we have central air in the place, so the air works fine. We just were, I don't know, we just kind of like assumed, okay, they just gonna switch the heat on and the heat is gonna work. Yeah, our mistake. What happened was I ended up going to the house like an hour before the guest was to check in. I don't know what made me go over there. I don't know if I was just like, let me just go do a walkthrough and make sure everything is good to go, what. But anyways, I went in and I called my husband and was like, oh my gosh, it is freezing in this house. What's happening? And so he was like, yeah, just turn the heat on. And so I turned the heat on, or whatever the case may be, and nothing happened. And so then we waited a little bit, still nothing happened. And so we, of course, was like panicking, like, oh my gosh, it is freezing cold outside. It's freezing cold in this house. These people are checking in less than an hour. Luckily, the guest messaged me and said they were running behind. They weren't going to be in for another like 2 or 3 hours. So I was like, oh my gosh, thank you, Jesus. And it was kind of like later on. So we had to call one of the like 24-hour heating people. They came out, and luckily it was just a filter that needed to be changed, and the thermometer, because we bought a new temperature gauge, like the wall gauge, it was not programmed correctly. That was the problem. It wasn't even like the heating system. We did need to have to get a new filter, but we changed the filter out. The heating got programmed, the thermometer gauge just on the wall, and then we had heat like going. The only hiccup was there was like a furnace smell, because the initial heat kind of had made it like have this funny smell. But the guests checked in after we got it done. We got the filter changed up, we got everything cleaned up, and they had no idea that it happened. So that was one of the things that happened. We had a guest message us during their stay saying that our shower wasn't draining properly, and so we were able to like pick up, because we're local, we were able to pick up, go over there. My husband essentially just opened it. There was like some like hair, I think, that was blocking something, or just like some debris. So he was able to go in, clean that out, fix that issue right away. The other good thing was at the time, the guest was like out on the town, like enjoying San Antonio. So we was able to get in while they were out. They came back, she knew that we were coming, but we didn't interrupt them in any type of way. So that was good as well. So just little things like that, like you just never know when an issue is going to happen. So make sure that you have a plan in place in the event that something like that does occur, because it will happen. Sorry guys, I'm trying to pull up my notes because I want to make sure I give you guys everything and I don't miss anything. All right, so the last tip that I'm going to give you guys is about your guest review. So the goal of an Airbnb host, or most hosts, you want to become a super host. And in order to become a super host, there is a certain amount of criteria, which I will go over that in another video, but there's a set criteria. But one of the criteria is your overall rating. And Airbnb utilizes stars. As you probably know, if you've ever stayed in an Airbnb or you host already, they use a star rating system. So ideally you want to have 5-star ratings, because you have to have a certain rating score in order to qualify to be a super host. So one of the issues that we ran into that I didn't think would be an issue, just to kind of prepare you guys, is guest reviews. What happens when your guests don't leave a review, and what does that even look like? Why would someone not leave a review? So our very first guest that checked in, she left us a review, and at the end of all of my stays, like probably around 8 o'clock, because their checkout time is typically 11, or some people I'll give to 12. So around 8:30, I'll send them a message, hey, blah, blah, blah. Thank you so much for allowing us to host you again, whatever my little message is. And then I'll say, I hope that we was able to give you true hospitality And if we did, would you please leave us a 5-star review? Our reviews are, I'll input a screenshot instead of me trying to tell it. I'll put a screenshot of like what I say to them. So that's the first time that I send them, because I know, okay, 8:39, they're probably getting up. Let me shoot them a message real quick to go ahead and put that bug in their ear about my review. Additionally, I have a welcome board in the home, which I will see if I have a picture of that, and I'll input that in as well. And on there it says, welcome so-and-so family. Please leave us a 5-star review. So there's another indicator, and right next to that I have a guest book, and they're pretty good about leaving us like little messages. So they'll leave us a message in the guest book, and right beside it is the little board giving them a reminder. So then after I send that message, I will typically go to the property and start to clean once they check out. And depending on how they left the property, and most of my guests have been very, very good with leaving our property super clean, I will send them another message like, hey, thank you so much for respecting our property, leaving it nice and clean. We really appreciate it.